There are about 400 million pigeons alive right now. That is more of them than there are people in the United States. In most big cities you can stand still on a pavement and have 6 of them walk across your shoes. One pigeon carries about as much meat as a chicken breast, and more iron than one. Nobody farms them, nobody feeds them, nobody ships them anywhere. And almost nobody in the Western world will touch one. That is not a single strange fact. There are 8 animals in this position, and by the end of this you will be able to name exactly what happened to every one of them. It is the same short list of things every time, and none of it has anything to do with the food. The pigeon. The bird on your windowsill is a rock dove. In the wild it nests on sea cliffs and inside cave mouths, on flat ledges and vertical faces full of holes. When humans started stacking stone and mud brick into permanent buildings, they accidentally built the exact habitat it had evolved for. The pigeon did not follow us into the city. We built it a cliff and it moved in. We noticed immediately. Genetic work published in 2012 by Michael Shapiro's group at the University of Utah, working across more than 350 breeds, confirmed that every domestic pigeon on Earth descends from that one wild bird, and that the domestication happened somewhere in the Eastern Mediterranean or Western Asia. This is one of the first birds we ever took in. The Egyptians industrialized it. Across the Nile Delta they built mud brick towers up to 15 meters tall, the height of a 5-story building, lined inside with hundreds of clay nesting pots. A large one held 3,000 to 5,000 breeding pairs. And the meat was only half the point, because the droppings were one of the most potent fertilizers in the ancient world. The birds ate grain from the fields, their waste fed the soil that grew the grain, and their young fed the farmers. A closed loop, 4,000 years before anyone thought to call it sustainable. Rome scaled it. Columella, writing in the 1st century, describes pigeon houses of 5,000 birds with feeding regimes and fattening protocols laid out like a manual. Medieval England turned it into law. The right to keep a dovecote belonged to the lord, the church and the gentry, and nobody else. 500 to 1,000 pairs, eating grain out of tenant fields, and the tenants were forbidden to touch them. It was a tax with wings. In 1789 the French peasants burned the dovecotes down, and the destruction turns up in the Cahiers de Doléances alongside demands for tax reform. But here is the part everyone skips. They did not stop eating pigeon. They wanted the right to keep their own. What ended it was the 20th century, and the first thing that happened is that the pigeon became a war hero. Cherami carried a message out of a trapped battalion in October 1918, wounded in the breast and blinded in one eye, and is mounted in a case in the Smithsonian today. In the Second World War a pigeon called Gigio stopped an airstrike on an Italian village and received the Dickin Medal, the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross. You do not put a decorated veteran on a plate with roasted vegetables. The second thing is that the racing and messenger birds that got lost bred with each other, and every western city acquired a feral population. The pigeon on the pavement outside your flat is not wildlife. It is the descendant of a domestic animal we abandoned. It is a stray, exactly like a feral cat, except nobody organizes rescues and nobody calls it sad. And here is where you get the rule that will explain half of this video. In 1966 the anthropologist Mary Douglas argued that dirt is not a property of an object. It is a property of a place. Shoes are not dirty on the shoe rack. They are dirty on the kitchen table. Nothing about the shoe has changed. In 2008 the sociologist Colin Gerolmack applied exactly that to this bird, in a paper in the journal Social Problems with the title How Pigeons Became Rats. He went through decades of newspapers and city policy and found that the reclassification had nothing to do with any change in the animal. Pigeons walk on restaurant tables. They roost on government buildings. They ride the subway. They do not behave like wildlife. They behave like unauthorized residents. And we do not eat unauthorized residents. Then somebody called them rats with wings, in a film in 1980, and that was that. People will tell you it is about disease. Pigeons do carry pathogens, Cryptococcus, Histoplasma, the bacterium behind psittacosis. All of them are respiratory. You get them by breathing dried droppings in an enclosed loft, not by eating a bird cooked to the same temperature that makes chicken safe. Daniel Hawks-Wackernagel at the University of Basel spent 30 years on urban pigeons and catalogued around 110 pathogens the birds can technically carry, and found the documented human transmission negligible against the size of the public fear. Meanwhile, the American Centers for Disease Control find salmonella in roughly a quarter of the raw chicken on supermarket shelves. So the bird with the warm metal is the one we call filthy, and the bird with the salmonella comes shrink-wrapped with a use-by date and a brand name. But none of that is what finished pigeon farming. What finished it was arithmetic. In 1925, a chicken took 16 weeks to reach market weight. Today it takes 42 days, and between the mid-1930s and the mid-90s the real price of chicken in America fell by more than half. A breeding pair of pigeons produces something like 12 to 16 young a year. A commercial chicken operation gets over 150 market birds out of a single hen. The last big American squab producer churns out around 1.5 million birds a year, and the United States gets through more than 9 million chickens. The entire American squab industry could cover the country's chicken demand for about 14 minutes. Squab is still on Michelin menus in Paris at 40 to 60 euros a plate, harvested at 28 days before the bird has ever flown. Same species as the one on the park bench, different postcode. The rabbit. The numbers here are almost unfair. A single doe can produce more than 40 offspring in a year. Her gestation is 28 to 31 days, a quarter of what a pig needs, a tenth of what a cow needs, and she can be pregnant again within days of giving birth. Each kit reaches market weight in about 10 weeks, in a hutch the size of a bedside table, eating hay and vegetable scraps. 100 grams of rabbit carries around 33 grams of protein. Chicken breast is 31. Beef sirloin is 27. Pork is 26. On fat, rabbit sits near 3.5 grams where beef is 8. It converts feed to meat at roughly 4 to 1, where a cow needs about 8. When the Food and Agriculture Organization ran its livestock efficiency comparisons in 2013, rabbit came out among the 3 most feed-efficient land animals on the planet. Rome farmed them in walled enclosures called La Poraria. Varro is writing about the management of them around 37 BCE. Medieval French monasteries bred them at industrial intensity, helped along by a piece of theological accounting so convenient that nobody in the monastery questioned it. Newborn rabbits were ruled to be close enough to fish that they could be eaten during Lent. Rabbit became the meat that was not meat. Then 3 things happened, and they are all completely different from each other. The first is inside the meat. In 1928, the Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson described what he called rabbit starvation. Trappers living on nothing but rabbit did not slowly weaken. They filled their stomachs to bursting and got desperately ill anyway, with diarrhea, headaches and a hunger that would not switch off. Work by Lauren Corden's group at Colorado State in the year 2000 put a number on why. The human liver can only process protein up to roughly 35 to 40% of total calories before ammonia starts accumulating faster than the body clears it. Wild winter rabbit is about 2% fat. You can eat it all day and go hungry while doing it. Every culture that ate a lot of rabbit ate something fatty alongside it: seal blubber in the Arctic, butter and lard in Europe. It was never the foundation, it was always the accompaniment. The second is that rabbits are physically undone by fear, not as a figure of speech. A sudden loud noise, an unfamiliar hand reaching into a cage, the scent of a predator on somebody's clothing, any of these can stop a rabbit's heart outright, and veterinary literature records whole enclosures of animals being lost during thunderstorms from the sound alone. The European Food Safety Authority's 2020 report lists stress-related losses as a recognized production problem in commercial rabbit farming. Chickens tolerate industrial confinement. Their stress thresholds are high enough. Rabbits frequently are not. The third is Australia, and it is the single most expensive act of homesickness in history. In 1859, a settler called Thomas Austin released 24 European rabbits near Winchelsea in Victoria because he wanted something to hunt at weekends. Australia had no predator equipped for them, a climate that allowed year-round breeding, and an entire continent of undefended grass. By the 1920s, there were an estimated 10 billion of them, more rabbits than there were people on Earth at the time. Australia built the longest unbroken fence ever constructed, around 1,100 miles of it, and the rabbits went round it, under it, and bred faster than anyone could keep up with. In 1950, the CSIRO released the myxoma virus into the wild population. In the first wave, only about 2 rabbits in every 1,000 came through it. Australia's rabbit numbers fell from an estimated 600 million to around 100 million in 2 years. Frank Fenner at the Australian National University then watched natural selection run in real time. Those 2 in 1,000 had not been lucky. They carry genetic resistance, and they passed it to their young. Within 6 to 8 rabbit generations, less than a decade, at that breeding speed, roughly 3/4 of infected animals were coming through the illness. The virus had bred a tougher rabbit and cleared the field of everything else. In 1996, rabbit hemorrhagic disease escaped a quarantine facility on an island off South Australia and reached the mainland in 8 weeks. It moves so fast that animals collapse mid-stride, out in open fields, before anybody has seen a symptom. It travels on surfaces, on insects, on the air itself. A single undetected introduction can empty a commercial breeding colony inside 48 hours, which is roughly the point at which insurers in several countries stopped writing policies for rabbit farms at all. And then, on top of all of that, we made it a pet. In the 1940s, the ethologist Konrad Lorenz described a set of features: large eyes on a round face, a small body, soft fur, a quiet manner, that switch on caregiving in adult humans whether we agree to it or not. It is the same set that makes infants and kittens and puppies impossible to ignore. The rabbit has every single one. Peter Rabbit arrives in 1893. The Velveteen Rabbit in 1922. Thumper in 1942. Within 2 generations of a war in which both Britain and America had officially encouraged families to raise rabbits in the back garden, the animal had moved from the hutch to the bedspread. Grocery stores that tried to stock whole-dressed rabbits watched them sit on the shelf until they spoiled, and quietly stopped. Evolution built the most efficient meat animal available, and then a children's book took it off the menu. Elsewhere it never left. France eats around half a kilo a head per year. Spain is the largest producer in the European Union. Malta, a country the size of a mid-sized American city, has the highest per capita consumption in Europe, and its national dish is a rabbit stew. China produces something like 40% of the world's rabbit meat, and in Chengdu spiced rabbit heads are sold on the street the way hot dogs are sold at a ballpark. The horse. This one has a date on it, which almost nothing in this video does. In 732, Pope Gregory III moved against the eating of horse meat in the territories the church was converting, because horse was being eaten ritually in pagan practice, and the entire point was to make Christians visibly not do what pagans did. His successor confirmed it. That is the origin of a food taboo that 1 billion people still observe today without knowing it exists. And it was never about the animal, it was a uniform. Iceland is the detail that gives it away. By most accounts, when the Icelanders accepted Christianity around the year 1000, the right to go on eating horse was part of what they negotiated. People will trade a god before they trade a dinner. Horse is lean, high in iron, and eaten today without comment across a large part of the world. Italy is the biggest consumer in the European Union. France has dedicated butchers for it. Japan serves it raw, sliced thin, as basashi. Across Kazakhstan and Mongolia it is not a specialty at all. It is simply the normal meat of a horse-based economy. And then there is what happened in 2013, when testing across Europe found horse meat inside products sold as beef, in lasagne, in burgers, in supermarket-ready meals. It was a real scandal about labeling, and about supply chains nobody could actually trace. It was not a scandal about poison. Nobody was harmed by the horse. The harm was that people had eaten something they had not agreed to eat, and the size of the reaction told you exactly how much of the taboo is about the meat and how much of it is about consent. Because the real reason is simpler and older than the Pope. A cow is a product, a horse was a colleague. It pulled, it carried, it went to war, it had a name, and for most of European history it was worth far more working than eaten. Once an animal has a name, its meat has a problem. The rat, now the hard one, and I want to be precise here, because the Western objection collapses on a distinction we never make. There is no such thing as the rat. There is a rat that lives in a sewer and eats what a sewer contains, and there is a rat that lives in a rice field and eats rice. They are not the same animal in any sense that matters to food. In the Mekong Delta of Vietnam, the second kind, the rice field rat, is trapped at harvest, when the animals are fat on fallen grain, and the trade runs to somewhere in the region of 3,500 tons of meat a year. It is grilled over charcoal, stewed in coconut milk, cooked in a clay pot. It is also, incidentally, pest control, because those rats were eating the crop. In West Africa the animals are different again and the status is higher. The cane rat, known locally as the grass cutter, is farmed and hunted across Nigeria, Ghana and Cameroon, and in urban markets it routinely costs more than beef or chicken. Not survival food, a delicacy, priced like one. The Western reaction has an obvious historical anchor, which is plague, and a less obvious one, which is that the rat is the purest possible case of the rule Mary Douglas described. The rat lives inside the human structure, uninvited, eating our discards. It is not wildlife, it is an unauthorized resident. So the animal we will not touch is priced above steak onto other continents, and in the case of the rice field rat, it has been eating a cleaner diet than the chicken in your fridge. The goat. The goat is here for a completely different reason from everything else in this video, and it is the reason I find most interesting. Nobody in the West is disgusted by goat. There is no taboo, there is no story, there is nothing at all. Goats were among the very first animals we domesticated, somewhere around 10,000 years ago in the Zagros Mountains, alongside sheep and before cattle. Goat is eaten routinely across most of Asia and most of Africa. World production runs into the millions of tons a year and it is climbing. By the number of human beings who eat it, goat outperforms every other red meat on the planet, and it is the leanest of the common ones, at under about 3% fat. Ask an American or a Briton why they do not eat goat and you will not get a reason. You will get a pause. That pause is the whole mechanism. Because there is no supply chain, there is no goat aisle. There is no butcher who breaks one down, no cut you can name, no dish your mother made, no recipe you half remember. The infrastructure that makes chicken effortless, the hatcheries, the processing lines, the cold chain, the shelf space, the thing your hands already know how to do at 6 in the evening, was built for animals, and goat was not one of them. That is not a taboo. That is a logistics failure wearing a taboo's clothes. And it is the most easily reversed item on this list, because there is nothing to argue anybody out of. The snail, same animal, two countries, two completely different objects. In an English garden a snail is a pest you tip over the fence. In a Paris restaurant it is a starter with a price on it. There is no biological difference. There is no species boundary doing the work. There is only which side of the channel you are standing on. The Romans farmed them deliberately in enclosures, and they remembered the name of the man they credited with doing it properly first, Quintus Fulvius Lepinus. The animals farmed today are mostly Helix pomatia and the smaller pedigrees, and the practice has its own word, heliciculture, which tells you how seriously it was once taken. Here is the part that undermines the whole idea of a national appetite. France, the country whose entire identity on this subject is fixed in a single word, imports the overwhelming majority of the snails it eats. The commonly cited figure is over 90%, coming in from Romania, Turkey and North Africa. Fewer than 300 snail farms are left in the country. The tonnage figures vary wildly depending on who you ask, and I am not going to pretend otherwise, but the import share does not vary. The most French food in the world is mostly imported, and notice what did and did not happen here. The snail did not become disgusting. It became foreign, and then it became expensive, and expensive is a category that the disgust reflex politely declines to enter. Insects. The efficiency argument has been made so many times that it has stopped landing, so here is the part that usually gets left out. The Food and Agriculture Organization published a full report on this in 2013. Two of its numbers matter. Insects are already part of the traditional diet of at least 1 billion people. And more than 1,900 species have been documented as eaten. This is not a proposal for the future, it is a description of what most of the species is already doing. Insects are cold-blooded, and that is the entire ballgame. A cow spends most of what it eats on holding itself at 38 degrees. A cricket has no such expense, so a far larger share of the feed becomes animal. They also breed at a speed no vertebrate can approach, need almost no water, and can be raised on organic waste that currently goes to landfill. And the Western objection is, again, entirely about location. We do not have a category called insect food. We have a category called infestation. An insect in the kitchen is a failure of the kitchen. It is the same rule as the pigeon. The objection is about where the animal is standing, not what it is made of, and it is why the marketing answer has been to grind them into flour and hide them, which is an admission that the problem is the shape of the animal rather than anything inside it. 2 billion people are already doing this. We are the unusual ones, and we are the ones who need our protein to look like nothing. Offal. The last one is the strangest, because there is nothing to catch, nothing to farm, and nobody to persuade. The animal has already been through the whole process. It is already in the building. Liver, heart, kidney, tongue. These were not poverty foods historically. They were the first things eaten, because they spoil fastest, and because every traditional butchery culture on earth understood that they were the good part. 100 grams of beef liver carries many times the daily requirement of vitamin B12, along with vitamin A, copper, selenium and iron in the heme form, which your body takes up several times more efficiently than the iron in plants. Nothing else on a supermarket shelf is close. Then, in the decades after the Second World War, Western offal consumption fell off a cliff. The estimates run as high as 90%, and even the cautious ones are dramatic. Liver and onions was a weekly fixture in ordinary households into the 1970s. Now it is a museum piece. What changed was not the liver. What changed was that muscle meat got cheap. Once you can afford steak, organ meat stops being the good part and starts being the part that poor people eat, and that is a one-way door. 9 billion chickens a year go through American processing plants alone. We take the breast. The most nutrient-dense tissue in the animal is handled as a disposal problem. Now count back through the 8, because the list is shorter than it looks. Cheap chicken took the pigeon and the rabbit, 42 days and a price collapse, and nothing else on this list could answer it. The city took the pigeon and the rat, on Mary Douglas's rule, where the animal did not change and its address did. A war medal took the pigeon a second time, a children's book took the rabbit. Absence of infrastructure took the goat, which is not a taboo at all and is the reason it stands out, and class took the snail and offal in opposite directions at the same time. The snail went up, foreign, then scarce, then expensive, then respectable. Offal went down, cheap, then common, then poor, then invisible. Same mechanism, same century, opposite results. That is the tell. If the direction can reverse depending on price and fashion, then it was never a fact about the animal. Not one of these 8 was dropped because of anything to do with nutrition, safety or flavor. Every one of them was dropped because something happened to the story wrapped around it, and almost all of it happened inside the last 100 years, which is nothing at all. Your great-grandmother would recognize very few of your objections. The real question is not why we stopped eating these 8 animals. The real question is which of the things on your plate tonight are there for a reason you could actually state out loud, and which are there because of something a pope said in 732, or because a man in Victoria wanted something to shoot at on a Saturday, or because somebody once put a rabbit in a picture book. We did not decide what food is. We inherited it from people who were not thinking about us, and we have been calling it common sense ever since.